American Airlines Flight 587 crashed in the Rockaways. That flight was
Remembering Flight 587 today marks 19 years since the crash of the American Airlines flight in Queens. Family members...
The first officer was still nervous that the plane might get caught in the turbulence. The plane started wobbling in the air like a wounded bird. About a minute later, the plane disappeared from the ATC radar. Now, investigators had to find out what happened to this plane in just a few minutes that caused it to crash amidst houses. Hey guys, welcome back to our YouTube. November 12, 2001, John F. Kennedy International Airport, New York. The captain was Edward State, and he was monitoring the instruments on this flight. The first officer, Stein Malin, was 34 years old and was going to fly the plane. But before that, the plane was refueled, which caused a delay of about half an hour. Finally, after everything was completed, the plane was ready for takeoff. But a small problem arose. American Airlines was supposed to take off from runway 31L. But another aircraft of Japan Airlines, Flight 47, was taking off from the same runway. This was a Boeing 747 jumbo jet, which was fully loaded. Such a massive jumbo jet requires 4 powerful engines to take off. These engines are put to the test when the plane is fully loaded. In such cases, all engines operate at maximum power, which enables the massive plane to lift off the ground. However, in these cases, while the engines propel the plane forward, they also leave behind highly pressurized air, generating a strong vortex. If another plane enters this vortex, it can crash due to turbulence. That is why another plane is allowed to take off only a few minutes after the first one, allowing the air to return to normal conditions. The Boeing 747 took off from runway 31L at 9:14 a.m. The weather was clear, and the tower controller watched the Boeing 747 ascend. Meanwhile, they made a radio call to American Airlines Flight 587, warning that it might experience wake turbulence. The controller instructed the plane to hold at runway 31L. Here, the plane waited for about 2.5 minutes. After that, ATC granted takeoff permission. The first officer was still nervous about the turbulence and asked if the distance was sufficient. The captain replied that by the time they reached the runway, it would be fine. The first officer asked again, "So, you are happy, right, Captain?" The captain responded, "Let's take off." A few seconds later, the thrust lever was pushed forward, and Flight 587 accelerated on the runway. At 9:17 a.m. and 20 seconds, about 3 minutes and 20 seconds after the Boeing 747 took off, American Airlines Flight 587 also took off from the runway. This plane was supposed to ascend to 500 feet and then turn left before heading to Las Americas International Airport in the Dominican Republic. At 9:18 a.m., the captain informed the controller and received instructions to climb to and maintain 13,000 feet. Now, the plane had to continue ascending until it reached 13,000 feet. However, just seconds after communicating with the controller, the plane encountered turbulence. The aircraft started wobbling mid-air. To stabilize the wobbling plane, the first officer began moving the rudder pedals left and right, repeatedly. He thought that doing this would help stabilize the turbulence. These rudder pedals are connected to the plane's vertical tail. The co-pilot was struggling to control the plane. Meanwhile, the ATC was unaware of what was happening inside the aircraft. About a minute later, the plane disappeared from the ATC radar. About 10 kilometers from the airport in Bell Harbor, there was complete peace just moments earlier. Then, suddenly, an out-of-control plane crashed in the middle of the city. 4 houses were reduced to rubble, and 6 houses were severely damaged. The fire caused by the crash engulfed nearby houses. In this city, most houses are made of wood. The reason for using wood in construction is that if sea levels rise, or natural disasters like earthquakes or tornadoes occur, wooden houses are considered safer compared to concrete structures. However, in this city, the presence of wooden houses allowed the fire to spread rapidly. Many people managed to escape from the burning houses, but the 5 people in the homes directly hit by the plane had no time to react. All 5 died instantly. Additionally, all 260 passengers and crew on board the plane perished. This accident terrified people because it happened on November 12th, exactly 2 months after the horrifying events of September 11th, when 3,000 people were killed. Fear and suspicion arose. Was this crash an act of terrorism? The pain of this tragedy was not limited to just this city. Miles away, in Santo Domingo, relatives waiting for Flight 587 passengers could not believe that the plane carrying their loved ones would never land at the airport. It was hard to accept that everyone had died. One of the plane's engines broke off and landed near a gas station, while the other engine got lodged between houses. Now, investigators had to determine what happened in those few minutes that caused the plane to crash, like a wounded bird into the houses. Immediately after the crash, both black boxes were recovered. One was the CVR, cockpit voice recorder, which records all cockpit conversations, and the other was the FDR, flight data recorder, which measures every instrument's activity. Finding both black boxes intact was crucial, as any mismatch in their timing could disrupt the investigation. The timing of both black boxes was synchronized to understand exactly what was said in the cockpit and what instruments the co-pilot was controlling at that moment. According to the ATC controller, they had already warned both pilots about possible wake turbulence, as the fully loaded Boeing 747 had just taken off from runway 31L. The co-pilot's fear was clearly recorded on the cockpit voice recorder. He repeatedly asked the captain if it was the right time to take off, or if they should wait a bit longer. Following the captain's orders, Flight 587 took off within 3 minutes. However, this was not a major mistake, certainly not enough to cause a total crash. The plane even reached an altitude of 1,000 feet without any issues. Then, it encountered wake turbulence. Since the co-pilot was already panicked, he became even more nervous. This turbulence was different from regular turbulence, caused by clouds. It was generated by the JAL aircraft. Flight 587 was flying along the same route that JAL Flight 47 had taken, following its path with only a slight directional difference. The Boeing 747 turned slightly later, while Flight 587 turned a bit sooner. As a result, Flight 587 encountered strong turbulence. The panicked co-pilot didn't know what to do. The captain was not flying the plane. The entire responsibility was on the co-pilot. In this situation, the co-pilot made a major mistake. He used the rudder pedals incorrectly. The rudder pedals control the aircraft's vertical tail, allowing it to move left or right. When turbulence hit, the co-pilot pressed the right rudder pedal hard, then immediately pressed the left pedal. As the plane swayed due to turbulence, he repeatedly pressed the rudder pedals left, right, left, right. This excessive use of the rudder put immense stress on the vertical tail. Eventually, the vertical tail broke off completely. With the control surfaces damaged, the plane could not be saved. The co-pilot continued pressing the rudder pedals 5 times in just 7 seconds. Investigators also questioned whether Airbus used the right materials in constructing the tail. After extensive testing, no evidence of compromised materials was found. Finally, it was concluded that the vertical tail exceeded its usage limits. Airbus blamed American Airlines for not properly training pilots on rudder use in large aircraft. Today, a memorial park named Rockaway Park stands in remembrance of American Airlines Flight 587. Every year on November 12th, people visit this place to remember those who lost their lives in this tragedy.